mentioned liberty 4 times. I think he could have mentioned it even more. I'd like to know from each individual up here, if you are the nominee and eventually our senator from the Commonwealth, your sense of fighting for liberty is critical to me in Washington. Tell me how you would go about doing that. What do you think are the critical components of that we face right now?
And to start off, we'll begin with Dave Christian and then proceed left to right.
Do we start off with a bio first, David, or we just go right?
The biographies are in the programs that were given out to people, and so to save on time, we're just going to proceed directly to questions.
Okay. Dom, as you know, and as many people in this room know, I've spent my whole life as a fighter and fighting for issues. And the critical issue of religious freedom, I think we're under attack. I think if you're a Christian, you're especially under attack. And the Constitution establishes that we have freedom of religion, freedom of worship, and yet if you have God on a piece of paper right now that is money, if you have God on a building, if you have the Ten Commandments outside of a courthouse, whatever it may be, it is under attack. The ACLU does not seem to be my friend, and the ACLU is definitely not your friend if you happen to be for religion in one way, shape, or form. I think you have to demonstrate and say no. Sooner or later, someone has to get up and say that there is nothing wrong with Christians practicing their religion. If we are arguing for Muslims to wear burqas, if we're arguing for other religions to do very unique things for their religion, Christians can also have the aspect of believing in God and sharing in God and talking about God. To have a woman challenged who happens to be a stewardess on an airplane, and I think it may have been Delta Airlines, and if I'm wrong, correct me, but there were 2 stewardesses challenged because they wore a cross around their neck. Their jobs were put in jeopardy. They were lectured. I think this is wrong. I think we have to stand up and say it's wrong. Where is the battle cry when someone takes on God? When someone takes on God in our country, we have to stand for something. Our founding fathers had God in almost every session. The U.S. Senate starts off with a prayer. The House starts off with a prayer. We have a chaplain. But yet, the American people in the workplace, if they wear a cross now, they are being challenged. I will say no to this. I will stand up for this. And I will be a defender. And I'm telling you, if we have to put the brakes on and stop the government so that God can be recognized, I will be there to do it. Thank you.
Mr. Rohr.
Okay, thank you. I think it's an excellent question. I think the question was, if I were in the U.S. Senate, what would I do to support and defend liberty? For me, defending of liberty is all about the defending of my constitutional oath. Religious liberty is the underpinning of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. William Penn, 1682, established his framework of government here on the basis that we should be allowed to worship our God as we so choose without being told to by the king or by some organized church. It was that underpinning that allowed William Penn to lay the basis which was then developed into our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, which is then includes the freedom of expression and the freedom to worship in the First Amendment. I do not believe that a person can take an oath for office and not aggressively defend all of the pieces of the Constitution, including that right to worship, understanding that our Constitution, which sets up our republic, is based on the Judeo-Christian view of law and life and view of God. That liberty and that underpinning of that concept is what gives us the ability in this nation to be unique among all nations of the world. And my position as senator is I will both stand up and articulate that defense using the bully pulpit that comes with this position, as well as my votes on the floor of the Senate to make sure that nothing is done that is passed that does not have my opposing vote for that which would demean or weaken any aspect of our liberty, including religious liberty, and I will advocate for everything that strengthens that. And folks believe we have lost so much in this nation. When it comes to religious liberty, when you understand that we cannot pray in our schools, we cannot have Bible reading in our schools, we understand how far we have gone as a nation. We lose that, we are no longer the ability to have a free country and provide freedom for anybody who wants to come. This is critically important.
Okay. Mr. Scarinci.
Well, good afternoon, my fellow conservatives. The central reason for my candidacy for the United States Senate is to restore freedom, personal liberty, and independence to the American people, to restore the constitutional republic that was created by our founding fathers and bestowed upon us. I think that we need to do more than just defend liberty and freedom because we have lost it in so many areas of our lives. We must restore it. The Department of Health and Human Services regulation is an appallingly unconstitutional edict from the federal government that eviscerates our First Amendment protection to the free exercise of religion. I'll do everything in my power in the United States Senate, not only, of course, to repeal Obamacare, but to repeal all of those federal laws and regulations that violate our First Amendment rights to the free exercise of religion. If you think about it, the freedom to exercise our faith and our religion is one of the main reasons why we have America. That's why people came over from the old world to found the new world, to give a new birth of freedom here in America. That's what America is all about. Freedom and liberty is what makes America great. Freedom and liberty is what makes America exceptional. President Obama will maintain that America is great because we have Social Security and Medicare, which, by the way, is the opposite of freedom and liberty because it compels free individuals to participate in a government-mandated plan. That's the opposite of why this country was founded. I'll do everything in my power to restore freedom, to restore liberty, and to restore the constitutional republic, and it's the Constitution that protects and defends our fundamental God-given unalienable rights. You know, the duty and purpose of the government is not to grant us rights, it's to defend our individual God-given rights, to defend our freedoms, to defend our liberties so that we can take care of ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. Religious freedom and liberties is paramount in this country, and I would continue to fight for them the way I have in the past. When I become a United States Senator, I'll do exactly what I've always done. Try to defend all of our liberties and freedoms. And this group here today is a big part of that. For many years, I've been involved supporting groups that help with religious freedom and Second Amendment rights. And it is groups like this that need to stay active. As your United States Senator, I would be very, very open to hearing your views and thoughts. For the last 4 years, I've had the honor to be the chairman of the Indiana Armstrong Patriots, a group like this that fought for many freedoms, religious freedoms, Second Amendment freedoms, freedoms all over. And this group and groups like that is the big key, because we have allowed our freedoms to be eroded and reduced because we did not get into groups like this, because we remain silent. These groups and all the groups like them over this state and this country must come forward the way they are and continue to come forward and even grow. And as your United States Senator, I will be right there with you defending those freedoms.
Mr. Welch.
Thank you. Loam, I'd like to start out by thanking Lohman and crew for putting together this spectacular conference year after year. I thought I'd give you a real quick background just to kind of frame where my thought process comes from and how I articulate my views. My roots in Pennsylvania run deep. I grew up in Chester County, went to Penn State where I have a mechanical engineering degree. A couple years out of school, I started a company called Mitos, and with hardly a cent to my name, grew that business. You know, I was naive enough at the time to believe that banks lent money to entrepreneurs with an idea on a napkin. They didn't then. They certainly don't now. but over a period of time grew that, bootstrapped it into a global business. And after I sold that, turned it into I realized I was an engineering geek at heart and wanted to help others do what I'd done. I wanted to help others live the American dream. So I started a company called Dream Adventures, where we help early stage entrepreneurs take an idea on a napkin. And I will tell you, something has fundamentally changed in this country over the last 12 years since I started my first company. And if you get a chance and you talk to somebody that starts a business from scratch, it's a daunting task. And I will tell you, it is the lifeblood of this economy. Early stage businesses are what create value in this society. And what we are doing is we are destroying freedom in this country through a hidden tax of regulation. We are destroying freedom through a massive expansion of this government that in so many ways is sending us down the road to bankruptcy. And I will fight with every fiber of my being between now and November 6th to make sure we get this country back on track. And make no mistake about it. This year, this election, Pennsylvania is the battleground. The road to the presidency will run through Pennsylvania. And this Senate candidate, the reason this Senate race is so important is this candidate will be the candidate that will have to hold the weight in this state day in and day out on why our values of limited government and personal responsibility, why those values help the ordinary American, and why the values of big central government actually hurt the same people they claim to protect. And what I assure you is together we can grow the party. Once again in Pennsylvania here, we can grow the party. Together we can win elections, but most importantly, together we can win the hearts and minds of the people of Pennsylvania on why our values matter and why our values are best for all Americans.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Welch. And again, a window here for anybody who wants a minute to follow up on anything that was previously said. Okay. We'll proceed now to the second question posed here by Eric Boehm from the P. Independent. And Mr. Rohr, we're going to start with you.
Thanks, David. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. As you may have noticed, I'm younger than most of the attendees here in the crowd, so I'm going to ask a question that I think is particularly important for people my age and even a little bit older than I. By the Social Security Administration's own estimates, the program is going to be bankrupt by 2037. Others say it could happen even sooner than that. I just turned 25 last week, so doing a quick little bit of math, I'm going to turn 50 in 2037. So I think it's a safe bet to say that myself and many others like me are not going to see a payout from Social Security. So my question to you is, would you support changes to Social Security that would allow younger workers, even up to age 35 or 40, to opt out of the program in order to be able to pursue their own retirement investments with those dollars? And if you don't, what reforms, if any, do you think are necessary for the Social Security program?
Okay, Eric, appreciate that question. I have 6 children who we've all talked about that question from time to time, as well as those who are retired, because the fact of the matter is the Social Security problem is, as you say, is effectively insolvent. It is not sustainable. So the question is, what do we do, and how do we fix it? This is my solution. Number one, for those who are on Social Security now, or within a period of years close to not being able to make any changes in their lives, we must ensure that they receive the payments that they were promised. That's a moral obligation that we've entered into. However, the structural aspect of the program is in place, the financial perspective is in place, that if we don't make changes, it will not be there for those who are even coming up into that time. So we've got to stop the cost increase, meaning we do it this way. We must take out the younger workers. Maybe it's an age of 50, maybe it's, as you say, 45, determine that age, where those up to that point are not compelled to join Social Security. They're allowed to go into a program like a 401k, have their own plan, and then be out of it, so you cut the cost on the outside on the out years. But secondarily, I believe that we have to reduce the cost of Social Security now, otherwise we will not find it able to pay out either, and that I recommend that we do by bringing it back into line with what the Social Security program was effectively set in place at the original beginnings to be, and that was a retirement assistance program, meaning we have to back off of such things such as disabilities, SSI, payments, where we have many, many new people brought into the program. Many illegal aliens are receiving SSI payments, and that is a program. That's a part of the program that the Social Security was never intended to fund, and that's a part that we can logically back off, bring it back to its major core. I think we can preserve and extend the life of Social Security.
Mr. Scarinci.
Yes, Eric, absolutely. That's a great question. Social Security and Medicare are insolvent now. Both of those programs are in the red. The combined unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare, by some estimates, exceed $100 trillion. There is no chance, there is no way that Social Security and Medicare are going to be around in their current form for my and younger generations. So my answer to your question is yes, absolutely. Restore freedom to Americans. Restore freedom to me, my generation, and younger generations by allowing us to opt out of Social Security and Medicare. Ronald Reagan was right. He talked about this many, many decades ago. Why is it that I have been paying into Social Security and Medicare for over 20 years? There is not one dime of my money held in those Social Security trust funds. They've been taken out every year by our career politicians to pay for current expenditures. So now the government has held zero of my money for my retirement. We have to do away with this entire system for my generation and younger generations. It's unsustainable, and it's the opposite of freedom and liberty. Why are we compelling generations of Americans? We're forcing them into this system that is bankrupt. I want to restore freedom to every American, and we can start by allowing my generation and younger generations to opt out. Perhaps we should even sunset Social Security and Medicare for the younger generations and empower individuals to provide for their own health insurance, to provide for their own retirement. I have my own retirement plan, thank you very much. I want to keep it. I have my own health insurance plan that I selected, that I fund, that I have chosen, and I want to keep those with me. That's how you restore independence. You empower individuals to provide for their own health care and their own retirement systems. The government can't do it and won't do it. The government systems are bankrupt.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Yes, Colin, or Eric, I'm sorry. Thank you for that question. You've identified one of the 800-pound gorillas in the room, and not talking about it will not cure the problem. But the direct answer to your question, should we consider having younger people opt out a portion? Yes, absolutely. That needs done. We also, many years ago, President Bush attempted to do something along these lines, and the general public rebuked it. But to ignore this problem much longer will be to our demise. We have to figure out a system, and we have to work with other people that has ideas, and there's many out there. Heritage Foundation has an option that they would like people to take a look at. There's several senators that do, and it's time to have this discussion. My baseline would be that people that are on it now and are depending on it now and that have paid into it in the past are due that money. But we have to take a look at possibly raising when you get it. There's a whole litany of things here, but I have spent my entire life in business. And when a problem, now this is a bigger problem than anything I ever faced, but I do know one thing for certain with all those years in business, ignoring the problem will not solve it. Many times I have talked to young people. I have an option to do that. There's a lot of them there that uses the facility that we supply, but I have asked them, will Social Security be there when you retire? And inevitably, they always answer, no. So I would tell them, well, what are you doing about it? You need to have your voice out there. You need to get involved. But then one day I had it thrown right back in my face, and they said, well, what are you doing about it? Your generation caused this problem. So I decided to run for the United States Senate and take issues like this on, and let's get some answers where we can all move on and our children's futures will be secure.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Welch.
Yes, Eric, I'd support private accounts for younger workers. I think it's one of the key elements that's needed in a grander plan. I agree with those up here. We need to make sure that we protect those that have paid into the system, that have been promised those benefits, those are at retirement or approaching retirement. We need to make sure we meet those commitments. By the same token, the president has created a false choice here. Under the current path, the system it's underfunded. It will not be there in its current form. And I think you need to put everything on the table to make sure we refine the system, to make sure that it does support the workers that are approaching retirement. I think Social Security, I will be honest with you, I think it's been a good thing for society. I think it's had a lot of benefits. And those that are in retirement that rely on it, I think it's done them very well.
Mr. Christian.
I'm David Christian, and I tell you this, that we have to protect and fight and secure Social Security, whether it be Social Security for the aged or Social Security for the disabled. Charity begins at home. We're spending billions and billions of dollars sending it overseas to people that say they hate Americans. There's people that want to kill you and kill you and kill you and you, and for one reason, because you're an American. Because you believe in the Constitution, because you have certain inalienable rights that they do not have. And I'm saying that Social Security can be protected. People have taken loans against the Social Security Trust Fund. But if we do not give the age, what age and who's going to be hit first when we cut something off? I'll just give you an example about young people. I have a factory in Philadelphia, and people don't know many of the taxes that are taken out, because there's acronyms for the taxes. And I had a gentleman come up to me and said, look, I'll work for you, but I don't want to be in the union. I said, I have an open shop. It's union and non-union. And I get a call 2 weeks later. And he said, you SOB. And I said, wait a second, I'm your boss. And he said, you SOB, you signed me up for the union. I said, what union? I said, do you have your pay stub? So he went and got his pay stub. It took him 2 minutes, and if you're waiting 2 minutes on the phone, it's a long time. And he said, you signed me up for the FICA. What I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, do you really think if we don't have people forced to put money aside, and if we don't fight to protect Social Security, and if we don't cut some of these funds that are going overseas and protect our own individuals back here at home, and as someone mentioned up here on stage, we're giving illegals Social Security. How can we break one law and give them something, the benefit of another law? I just do not see that. I think that we have to address many issues. We have to look at many things. You can look at all the different things that happened. Since the 1960s, you had the war on drugs, the war on poverty, you have the war on the borders, we have international wars. These are billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Where's the
Christian.
success? Let's put it into our own. Charity
Thank you
begins
very
at
much.
home.
And gentlemen, anybody want to take a moment to respond to something that was said previously? All right, very good. Well, we'll move on then to the next question, which is mine, and we'll start with Mr. Scaringi. Since the terror attacks of 9/11, the United States has been at war for 10 years. And as we have destroyed the regime of Saddam Hussein, that we have overthrown the Taliban, that we have killed Osama bin Laden, I wanted to ask you, what, in your mind, constitutes victory with our military operations in the Middle East, and what would you consider your defense spending priority as in the context of the federal budget crisis that we find ourselves in?
Well, with regard to the war in Afghanistan, I think that we have accomplished the goals that we set out when we went in the first place, which was to remove the Taliban regime, to punish the Taliban for aiding and abetting al-Qaeda, and to decimate al-Qaeda. And we have accomplished those goals. In fact, we accomplished those goals many years ago. We've been in there for about 10 years now. And we accomplished those goals years ago, and then the mission changed and became one of nation building. So now we're building roads, bridges, and schools in Kabul. And we're trying to install a liberal, pluralistic democracy in a 7th century tribal-based society. It's doomed to fail. And we are losing the lives of U.S. soldiers on a near daily basis now in Afghanistan. We've seen the results of how the Afghani people have responded to this inadvertent and accidental burning of Korans. They shot and killed U.S. soldiers. I think it is time to come home. Let's bring the troops home from Afghanistan. Mission accomplished. Not only, the most important goal is to save the lives of our U.S. soldiers, who are brave and bold and courageous men and women, but we have to think of their safety first. Bring them home and keep them safe here in America, and stop subjecting them to all kinds of violence in a nation that no longer wants us there. And with regard to budget savings with the Department of Defense, we can save $10 billion a month if we bring our troops home from Afghanistan now. The time is now. Mission accomplished.
Thank you, Mr. Scaringi. Mr. Smith, what constitutes victory in the Middle East?
I was trying to catch that fly. He's really didn't get it. Well, first and foremost, Mark was very right on with most of what he said, but we cannot ever forget about the brave men and women that we sent over there to win that war. And whether that mission was laid out in advance and it was ironclad and we did everything we could to win that war decisively and quickly, I'm not sure. I'm going to bear off just a little bit. I've been giving it a lot of thought. If I become the United States Senator from Pennsylvania, and that question comes up that we need to go into some foreign country, be it Afghanistan, be it Iraq, I really believe that that would be the most heart-wrenching, difficult decision that any elected official could make. But I would go a little further on that, because I have no problems representing the people of Pennsylvania on economic issues, on all issues. But that one there has me just a little concerned, because my entire life I was always the type that, well, if we're going to go into Afghanistan or something like that, I want to be one of the first to do it. It's hard for me to ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't do myself. But to put these brave men and women in danger, that is very, very concerning to me. And just hypothetically, what if the rest of the Senate and the House and the President decided we should go into a certain country and I wasn't completely sure, but they were? That is where I guarantee you I would get behind our troops, I would get behind that decision, and we figure out we have that mission laid out right in advance, and we do not go full bore, so to speak. You do not fight a war by half, and President Eisenhower once said, you do not win a war without public opinion. And I lose a lot of sleep over those questions, but our brave men and women are to be commended.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Welch.
David, to answer the first part of your question, I think victory is, we've clearly disrupted al-Qaeda. There's no question about that. I think victory is to make sure that these regions become stable so that al-Qaeda cannot reconstitute itself. That is the big risk as we look at both Afghanistan, Iraq, and several other nations. I think the number one priority, when you look at defense spending as a whole, you have to look at the number one priority of the federal government, which is to secure the safety and security of its citizens. That's the number one priority. Right now, we spend between 4% and 5% of our GDP on defense. I think that is clearly a sustainable number and a number that allows us to have the resources to keep ourselves secure. I also think we need to look at areas within the defense budget where there is waste, where there is abuse, and we need to make sure that we continue to invest in technology. We have to be honest with ourselves in this new world. The Chinese are going to have more troops than we will, just based on pure numbers. The Indians would have more troops than we have. But what we do have that no other nation has is the most innovative society in the world, in which we can develop new technologies. The drones are a great example of how we are able to use technology to our advantage. And I think we need to make sure we continue to invest in those things. I think the concern many Americans have is when they look at this president, it is number one that he is engaged with our enemies while at the same time keeping our allies at bay. I think that, coupled with the fact that he has just poor negotiating tactics. I mean, he telegraphs exactly what we're going to do to our enemies. This is bad policy. That would be like you and I, or it'd be like me going into used car dealer and saying, I'm not going to spend more than $15,000 for a car. Now let's start negotiating. And that's basically what the president has done in Afghanistan. That's what he did in Iraq. We need to make sure that we rely on our generals. We need to make sure that our enemies don't know exactly what our plans are. It does not need to be broadcast on CNN. And that's the best way we're going to achieve our goals long term.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Mr. Christian, to you.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
What, to ask, what, after 10 years at war, what constitutes victory in the Middle East? And as we go forward with our federal financial position, what priority does defense spending have?
In reference to war, I've been in uniform. I've served my country in uniform, and I'm proud of it. And I would say, through experience, through personal experience, there's always a mission and there's always an objective, especially in war. And the mission and objective has gotten fuzzy in reference to both Afghanistan, Iraq, and right now North Africa. Unfortunately, many times the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House does not get to vote on some of these issues when an executive order goes out and commits troops to a certain area. So I'm saying we completed our mission. We got bin Laden. We got Hussein. So once we completed those missions, I say bring our boys home. Why wait to the year 2014? Who wants to have the last son that dies in Afghanistan? Who wants to have the last son that dies in Iraq? Are we making ourselves better loved right now in Afghanistan? I wrote a paper in 2001, right after 9/11, and the paper was how to fight using guerrilla war forces, special forces, and sending those teams in. Instead of putting conventional troops on the ground where you're driving along and an IED takes out someone who happens to be a nurse or happens to be in water purification or some other military occupational specialty that does not mean for them to be on the front lines of the trauma of war. We have accomplished our missions in both Iraq and Afghanistan. The time has come to bring our boys home, bring our girls home, bring our contractors home. And if we go into another operation, let us always have a plan, and let that plan be submitted to the United States Senate. And let us either support or object. But everybody here was appalled at 9/11. We got our pound of flesh. We got the person who perpetrated the different things in reference to both bin Laden and also Hussein, who backed bin Laden. So I think the time has come. The mission is complete. We have to object to executive orders that put us into North Africa. We've lost billions of dollars there right now, and we as senators can stand up on the floor and hold up an awful lot of the U.S. government until they abide by what we say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Rohrer, the question goes to you.
Okay, thank you, David. As far as I'm concerned, when I consider, or I was, if I was a senator, I would consider these questions. I first of all consider them within the context of my constitutional oath. In both cases, when you're talking about the military, we have an obligation clearly to make sure that we have a national defense, a military that's second to none, capable of defending the property interests of the American public, our citizens, and interests abroad. The military, the use of the military is to be selectively done. When our military is engaged in conflict for more than a brief period of time that's allowed, there must be accompanied by it a declaration of war. Failing to follow that procedure allows for undefined missions, undefined exit strategies, and therefore an inability to define what is meant by victory. And that's why we are languishing in places across this country, around the world today, both in the Middle East and in Afghanistan, because we never defined clearly, as far as I am concerned, why we should be there in the first place. And therefore, we don't know when the job is done, and therefore our guys are going to remain there until we pull them out. And really, this is what it comes down to. So anyways, that has to be defined. Now, as far as the military budget is concerned, clearly there are savings that we can find in our military budget. But when the president talks about cutting military spending in the budget by $500 billion, this puts at risk our men in uniform. This puts at risk the ability of our military overall to provide that, maintain that #1 status. And so there is definite problems with this administration and what they are doing and how they're handling this. But again, my procedure would be within the context of what is mandated by our Constitution, because that is the basis for what we should be doing and how we determine if we've accomplished our task.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comment or follow-up on what's been said? All right, very good. Dom, the question goes to you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I think any one of you would be better than Bob Casey for my interest and the interest in Pennsylvania. I'd like to stipulate that. And when I look at the final four that we have with presidential candidates, it's the same standard I've been using in Philadelphia. Any one of the 4, 7, 8, however many it was, well, maybe Huntsman, would be superior to the person who's currently in the office. My standard, and one of the reasons I came here to eyeball you and see how you respond to this, is to get a sense for listeners of who can challenge Bob Casey Jr. Now, I've been around the senator a number of times, and I see what the difficulty is in challenging. He's a very good poser. He's very good at masquerading what he really has done. We know what his voting record is. He comes across as mild-mannered. He is a friend of the president, plays basketball with the president, but he has a magical name. He has money. So my question is, I'd like to hear explicitly from you, how do you deconstruct that? How do you challenge a Bob Casey if you're our nominee?
And Mr. Smith, we start with you.
Okay. I believe that Senator Bob Casey will be a formidable foe, but I do believe that he is beatable. We have already, my campaign has already started that long process. We are running ads across the state now, bringing forth his record. I mean, he has a record that he has to run on. Cash for clunkers, he voted for. TARP, he voted for. The bailouts, he voted for. Obamacare, he voted for. I would like to ask the crowd right now, who would like to see Obamacare repealed? Let me ask the crowd one more question. The president, with complete agreement with Senator Casey, will not allow us to drill in Anwar. He will not allow us to drill offshore. And he has an all-out war on coal. Do you agree with that? No. Senator Casey has a record. We have candidates up here that can bring out forth that record. And it'll take some fortitude and articulation and funding. I have that. And I am willing to put that forward to see Senator Casey go to the private sector where I came from. There is not... There is nothing more important to me right now than to see President Obama sent back to Chicago and bring Senator Casey back to Pennsylvania so he can get reacquainted with Pennsylvania values.
Mr. Welch, question to you.
It's quite comical, actually, if you go back and look at videotape of Casey when he ran in 2006. He actually talked about balancing the budget. He talked about being fiscal responsibility. His big claim to fame was he was going to be an independent voice for the people of Pennsylvania. This is a guy that has voted with the president 98% of the time. That is really hard to do. I challenge those of you in the crowd that are here with your spouse, over the next couple weeks, start keeping track of how often you agree or disagree with your spouse. I suspect many of you it'll be more than 2% of the time. So this is a guy that clearly is nothing more than a rubber stamp for Barack Obama and his big government policies, and it is clear that we need a candidate that can bring that to the people of Pennsylvania's attention. What's interesting is when you look at his numbers, 65% of the people don't associate anything with Bob Casey. They have no association with him. To your point, he's kind of just hidden for several years. They're trying to get him out there now because they're seeing the same problems in the polling that all 5 of us are seeing, which is the people of Pennsylvania know they deserve better. 35% of the people believe, 37% of people believe he deserves re-election. 39% believe he does not. That's an incumbent, that he is very vulnerable, and that's why I'm confident one of us will take him out. In this race, though, we're going to talk about a pretty stark contrast with our vision for America. We're going to talk about empowering the American entrepreneurial spirit, empowering people to use their God-given talents and creativity to create products and services that people need. And we're going to contrast that to the Casey Obama agenda, which really is a top-down approach to society, one that has failed throughout history, has failed throughout time. We're going to talk about our vision in which we hand over America in better shape than we found it, to be the next generation to do that. And the Obama-Casey agenda, which is based purely on selfishness. This huge government expansion of spending, borrowing 41 cents on every dollar of our children's money, is nothing more than selfishness. And I'm confident that all 5 of us will be able to articulate that message and make sure that the people of Pennsylvania know that Bob Casey is not a moderate. Bob Casey has a 0 heritage rating. Bob Casey has a 0 Club for Growth rating. That means he is actually to the left of Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and Barack Obama, if you can believe that.
Thank you. Mr. Christian.
Yes. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, and conservatives out here in the audience, when Bob Casey was elected, 40% of the people thought they were voting for his father. So what's happened in the past, hopefully we don't repeat in the future, and we can educate the people that it is not his father. Bob Casey spent a week in Philadelphia walking around Philadelphia Independence Mall, and as he was walking around, the radio stations and TV stations were pointing out that no one knew that he was a United States Senator. He stays so far below the radar in terms of people and personalities in this audience and the people on this stage that some of the people don't even know who he is and what he looks like. If you go to Lackawanna, Luzerne County, you'll know what he looks like because you've seen him grow up through all the many political offices. I think Bob Casey's never had a job that his father didn't help get him in politics. We can beat Bob Casey by establishing what people have pointed out here, voting 97, 98% of the time with the President of the United States. And I think Steve stole my line there. I used to say that I don't get along with my wife 97, 98% of the time. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. I don't get along with them 97, 98% of the time. And you folks don't get along with your mates either. You have to be able to disagree. If someone is a robot, and that's what we have. We sent a robot to Washington, D.C., and it was unfortunately, he slipped in under the radar. He beat a good conservative in Rick Santorum, and it was a shame. It was an absolute shame. If you have to compare the two, Rick Santorum and Bob Casey, how Bob Casey is in there representing us today. Bob Casey, I think, would be confused if you asked him what he stands for. I thank you very much.
Mr. Rohr, the question goes to you.
Well, Dom, I'll look you in the eyes and answer this question. I think it's a fair one. When I was in the House of Representatives, I was serving appropriations for 14 years, and Bob Casey was either Auditor General or Treasurer for that time, and sat in my office many times, and I've talked to Bob. He's a nice man. But the problem is that Bob has not done what he said he would do, and that's the first thing that he's going to have to answer for. When he ran, he said he was going to be pro-life like his father. He is not. You cannot vote for the elimination of the Mexico City rule, or embryonic stem cell research, or vote for Obamacare with embedded abortion funding and say that you're a defender of life. He said it was Second Amendment. You can't vote to confirm members to the bench who believe that the Second Amendment doesn't any longer exist. He did that. He said he was going to reinvigorate the free enterprise system, bring jobs back to Pennsylvania. But you can't do that when you vote with the president 98% of the time, and actually go as far as implementing or writing bills that would eliminate the fracking process, which would stymie the development of natural gas drilling in this state. You can't say that you're on that side of the road either. I also think that you could say that Bob Casey has not led. He's not led. He's not been a champion on the issues for freedom. He's not been a champion on the issues issues important to the people of this state. He's effectively followed. He's hooked his chariot to the president, and he's there with him. He's not passionate either. And you have to be passionate if you're going to fight for the defense of freedom. If you're going to fight for the growth of government, I don't think you have to be passionate, and he's not. He's not responsive. The people across the state don't know who he is. I've been into the inner city where folks were voted for him the first go around. They're not going to vote for him again. And I know from me working in Philadelphia, and I've been privileged to get the endorsement from the black Pentecostal pastors in Philadelphia. They may have been there the first go-around. Many of them aren't going to be there the second go-around. You can't just go to a community and say, vote for me at election time, and then say goodbye. Bob Casey is not the man he was when he ran 6 years ago. He now has a vote record. I have a vote record also, and my vote record stands in sharp contrast to his, and I really do look forward to taking on Bob Casey in the debate.
Thank you. Mr. Scaringi, to you.
Well, you focus on his voting in legislative record. Senator Casey voted 98% of the time, according to the way President Obama has instructed him to vote. And like Steve Welch, Senator Casey voted for Barack Obama in 2008. We'll liven it up a little bit. Senator Casey voted for the bailout of those failed Wall Street investment banks. Senator Casey voted for this massive new regulations from Dodd-Frank to Obamacare. Senator Casey voted to bail out big labor. Senator Casey voted for this massive new government stimulus spending bill where we're borrowing nearly $1 trillion to protect the jobs of government workers, while millions of workers in the private sector have lost theirs. Senator Casey voted to continue funding for ACORN. Senator Casey voted to protect and continue funding for Planned Parenthood. The country is bankrupt. We can't pay our own bills, yet Senator Casey finds a couple $100 million to give to Planned Parenthood. Senator Casey voted to rescind Ronald Reagan's Mexico City rule, so now once again we have taxpayer funding for abortions overseas. Senator Casey is not pro-life. He's abandoned his father's right to life cause and mission. Senator Casey is not pro-Second Amendment. He voted to confirm Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan to the United States Supreme Court, two Supreme Court justices who cannot find the Second Amendment in their version of the Constitution. This Obama-Casey agenda has bankrupted our country and is destroying our freedoms and our liberties. And the American people know it and are demanding change. Senator Casey has not led all over Pennsylvania. I've been traveling all over this great state since the fall of 2010. Everybody I meet says we haven't seen Senator Casey, we haven't heard from Senator Casey. Where has he been? And that is going to hurt Senator Casey's reelection chances because Pennsylvanians are confronting the worst economic recession since the Great Recession. And lastly, I have the right message. I can communicate and deliver that message. The message is freedom and liberty and personal responsibility and restoring the constitutional republic.
And actually, anybody care to take a minute to respond?
I'll respond to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
Well, Mark, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to set the record straight because there is so much misinformation out there. To be crystal clear, I voted for John McCain in 2008, so that we're crystal clear on that. I was registered as a D in the primary, and I voted for what I thought was the lesser of two evils at that time. I have been a registered Republican since the time I was 18 years old. When I was 18, I stuffed envelopes for Joe Pitts, who was a congressman. I think that lived up to the values when a lot of Republicans abandoned those values. I will tell you, in 2005, I was 28 years old. I was working 100-hour weeks building my business, and I was very frustrated. I was frustrated with Republicans that had control of the House, the presidency, and the Senate, and exploded the size of government. I changed my registration out of protest, out of frustration, and let's be honest with ourselves. We lost hundreds of thousands of voters across the state because we didn't govern consistent with our principles. And the way that we're going to win those back is to go back to those voters and demonstrate that we're going to be consistent again. We're going to live within our principles of limited government, personal responsibility. And I think that I'm a good messenger to go out and do that. Somebody that can say, I strayed as well. I strayed, and it was a mistake. If I had it to do over again, trust me, I would fight like every one of you to change the party from within. But I can't do that, but I do believe in redemption. Part of redemption is you work to get rid of your mistakes, and that's why I'm working hard to get rid of my mistakes. That's why I work for Pat Toomey. I left my job to work full-time for Pat Toomey to make sure he was reelected in 2010, or well elected in 2010.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. And Mr. Scaringi, 1 minute for you.
Steve, in 2008, you voted for Barack Obama for president, yes or no?
I voted for John McCain.
Well, and again, we can't follow up to follow-ups, and in fact, at this point, we need to proceed to closing statements. 2 minutes or less, gentlemen, if you can, and actually, Mr. Welch, we will proceed, starting with you.
Okay. So this is an appropriate start. Second chances in life are a blessing. And in 2010, the voters of Pennsylvania gave us a second chance as a party here in Pennsylvania. And as your U.S. Senate nominee, I will travel to every corner of the state to win back those voters that we lost in 2006 and 2008. And I'm going to use my story, my political story, which we just discussed, but also my personal story. Starting a business from scratch with hardly a cent to my name and building it up into a global manufacturing company. Helping others do the same, helping other people take an idea on a napkin and turn it into a viable business, the American dream. You know, as you travel across the state, you hear anxiety about the rise of India and China and emerging markets. And I can tell you, as somebody that reads 1,000 business plans a year, there is no shortage of innovation in this country. We are the most innovative society the world has ever seen. Nothing even comes close. I've been in manufacturing plants on almost every continent. I can tell you there is not a single society in the world as productive as the United States of America. But we will not be that way forever if we continue to allow the Obama-Casey agenda to apply to hidden tax or regulation, if we continue to allow them to take us down the road of bankruptcy, and that's why I'm working and fighting every day between now and November 6th to make sure we get this country back on track. And I hope to learn the support of each and every one of you to make sure that we take down Mr. Obama and Mr. Casey in 2012. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. And Mr. Christian, to you. A 2-minute closing statement.
It's for me, okay. In reference to being the next United States Senator, what's on the line for you folks? The Supreme Court's on the line. There's a number of issues on the line there. And why am I running for the United States Senate? Because I think I can make a difference. But I think in order to make a difference, you have to be a leader. And I ask myself why I was the only candidate that's sitting up here that was targeted by the state committee, but was targeted by the governor, was called by the lieutenant governor and said, we are going to challenge your petitions. We're going to take you off the ballot. And for the last 3.5 weeks, I've been in court, in Commonwealth Court, taking campaign monies, using attorneys, and fighting just to be a citizen like you want to be, fighting to represent you. And why, during that time, if in fact leadership is going to be an issue, and if in fact we can raise our hand and say we can talk out when someone's doing something wrong, why didn't the endorsed candidate say this is frivolous? Why didn't Steve Welch go to the governor and say this is frivolous? We should not be targeting one of our own. We should have an open primary. Leadership begins in our own ranks. Leadership begins at home. Leadership begins when we teach our children. And leadership begins at this table here. And I'm telling you, it's painful. You know how hard it is if you have 6 people that you have to go out and you want to talk to them and get your petition signed. Committee person or whatever else. 10 minutes apiece for those 6 people. That's 1 hour. To get 3,000-some-hundred signatures signed and then have them challenged in court. I could have challenged each and every person up here. So could you folks. But why waste taxpayers' money? Why waste it? Let us not show leadership. And I think that was the first chance that Steve Welch had an opportunity to demonstrate leadership.
Thank you.
And it was at my expense. Unfortunately, he didn't.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. And a closing statement to you, Mr. Rohr.
Upon completion and the signing of the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, Benjamin Franklin walked out into the square. And a woman approached him and said, Dr. Franklin, what just happened in there? And he said, we have just given you a republic, if you can keep it. Franklin was wise because he understood that the default position in any civilization is not freedom, it's tyranny. And that a free republic such as we've been blessed with has to be defended by people in all generations. And that includes us here today. To me, that's what the Senate race is all about. Who's going to go to Washington best able to defend the republic and the principles upon which we stand? I've been in the House for 18 years. I've defended the various issues of life in the Second Amendment. I've stood proudly with such groups as the Pennsylvania Family Institute on issues of education and parental rights and homeschooling, and the Commonwealth Foundation on pension reform and limited government and government reform in general, and the NFIB, guardian of business I've gotten from them many times, and Second Amendment, NRA, Guns for America, endorsed me this week and said they know that where I have stood and where I will stand in Washington. I've stood strongly for right to work, proudly, been a prime sponsor, because it's a matter of freedom. And I can guarantee and commit to all of you that if the people of Pennsylvania send me to Washington, I will fight in the defense of our freedom. Will not just sit, but I will be out front championing the causes of all of these issues and more that protect our republic. Where I have stood in Pennsylvania, you can be assured I will stand in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Closing thoughts to you, Mr. Scaringi.
Well, when Barack Obama was rated one of the most liberal senators of his time, I was not confused by Barack Obama and what he wanted to do to our country. When Barack Obama said, "We Pennsylvanians cling to our guns and our God," I was not confused by Barack Obama and what he intended to do to our country. And Senator Casey is nice, yes, but I'm not confused by what Senator Casey's policies are doing to our country. President Obama and Senator Casey are trying to transform a free and proud and prosperous and independent people into dependents and wards of the state. This is the Obama-Casey agenda. They're copying the failed policies of the failed European social welfare state and bringing it home here to America. That is what has ground our economy to a halt, and that is what is bankrupting our country. We have to send a man to the United States Senate who understands these things, who understands the importance of restoring the Constitution, the importance of restoring freedom, the importance of restoring liberty and independence and personal responsibility and self-reliance. You see, these are the principles and values that work. This is how we built America into the healthiest, wealthiest, strongest nation on this earth. And we've lost our way. Too many people in Washington, D.C. are confused about what it means to be an American. I'm not. I know what it means to be an American. An American is free, is proud, is independent. I want to go to Washington, D.C. to restore freedom to America, and with your help, I can get there. We can take our country back. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, and our final closing statement goes to you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you for this opportunity for all of us to speak with this great crowd today. Whenever I was looking for a candidate to support in the many years that I was voting, the biggest thing I wanted to know was I wanted to look beyond, if I could, and see character. That is what I did when I first talked with Senator Pat Toomey. So my closing statement's just going to be a little bit about my background. I was raised on a farm, the family farm that I still live on today, and I love that farm, but you can't get that out of your blood. But my wife and I, we've been married for 43 years. We raised 3 biological daughters, and then she and I decided that we could do more, so we went through the Lutheran Youth Services and found a family of 4 in the southern tip of Texas. We brought that family of 4 up to our home. We adopted those and raised that group also. And that group together has given Sandy and I 8 grandchildren thus far. As a young man, I was a heavy equipment operator on Union coal mines. Then in the mid-'80s, I decided to gamble everything I had and start my own coal mining business. And through faith, hard work, and perseverance, we got that company up and running, and over the next 2.5 decades, built that into the 9th largest coal-producing company in the state of Pennsylvania. employing over 130 people and helping to employ thousands others. I lived the American dream. And I see that dream in jeopardy for our children, our grandchildren, and their children. And that is what has motivated me, instead of retiring, to get into this fight for their future. I am not running for a new career or a career change. I am simply running to change Washington. And I'm asking for your vote and your support in my endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. This concludes the time that we have on this program. I want to thank Dom Giordano and Eric Boehm for being with me, and to especially thank all 5 of the distinguished gentlemen here who are seeking to become your next United States Senator. A round of applause, please. Thank you very much.
Very good job.
Thank you very much.